The following program is a Boris Productions presentation. On Watch, Connecticut's Emergency Service Volunteers is a CPTV Connecting Our Communities initiative in partnership with the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, Citizen Corps, the Commission on Fire Prevention and Control, the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and the Public Health Foundation of Connecticut. Additional support comes from the Torrington Medical Reserve Corps and MyTV9.
What's the address of your emergency?
I called to report an injury up on Case Mountain in Manchester. But you got a call from my friend who's up there. He's been mountain biking. I guess he fell and he can't walk.
911.
There's a fire at 100 Preston City Road, Voluntown, Connecticut. There's smoke coming out of the full roof of the house.
Everyone out, okay?
Yep.
We'll get him there.
Okay, please hurry.
Screaming, a little boy screaming. I saw him go underwater. His brother is screaming, "No, I can't get to you." I don't know what's going on.
Cars started getting twisted around and flipped over, and dirt flying everywhere, cars flying everywhere, debris flying everywhere.
Emergency. 2 West Ledge Drive. What's going on? There's a fire, and it's going up pretty good. Where? At the Peachtree Apartments, and it's burning really bad.
You report the structure fire.
There's a fire. It's a West Ledge Drive.
Get everybody evacuated. Get away.
Okay, come on.
In the last 25 years, the number of emergency calls have doubled in the United States. Some, such as for Katrina and September 11th, required the need for a massive response. Most calls, however, are local calls from citizens. What if you called for urgent help and no one came? The reality that you may be left bleeding on the side of the road, or putting out your own fire, or hopelessly lost may one day be a distinct possibility. Nearly 70% of the country geographically and 40% of its population are served by emergency volunteers. In approximately 70% of Connecticut's communities, volunteers are the first line of defense. But between 1984 and 2006, the number of those volunteers nationally has declined by 8%. The numbers are especially drastic when it comes to volunteer firefighters, who make up the bulk of the state's first responders. These may just be numbers. To others, maybe you, they may mean the difference between life and death. Historically, our desire to be there for our neighbor is well documented. Actually, that need to help reflects the very essence of who we are.
I think it's part of human nature, but part of the community itself. From even during medieval times, the police departments, they didn't have police departments. It was, okay, we're a community and we have this need, and people step forward. Okay, it's Monday night, so it's your turn to go out and guard this town. And it's Tuesday night, my household provides somebody to go out and guard the town.
Our nation was based in systems that were created by volunteers. From our Minutemen all the way to what used to be the fire departments, and now the emergency and medical service, the providers that we have, is based really in the love for our country. Then September 11 came and changed the entire world. And I think then since then we have acts of terrorism, bioterrorism, natural disaster, man-made disasters. And now we realize that we cannot wait for the official a state response or county response or local response or federal response. I think we have to have a community that is ready to serve.
Out of 320 some fire departments, there are only about 32 that actually have some career personnel. So we really depend heavily on the faith and trust of the public to come and help us with the volunteer side of the house.
When emergencies happen, people have to pitch in because we are a community.
Today, communities are attempting to resuscitate the rescue system, which at one time or another touched us all. It's not simply sentimentality on our part, it's also an act of desperation.
The volunteers save the town and the taxpayers major amounts of money.
If we just had to staff one piece of apparatus with a crew of 4, which is the minimal crew, 24/7, that would cost $750,000 to $1 million every year that the community would have to pay.
If we don't have the volunteers, a lot of the functions that we do supply to the town could not happen.
When there's something bad is happening in Manchester, my people are out in the streets. The police department are out in the streets. There's a lot of support activity that has to be accomplished, and this is the gap that these volunteers fill.
As soon as the volunteer driver program became up and running and really was a solvent program, we more than doubled our volume.
We have thousands of visitors that come in and out of this channel every weekend, and volunteers in town have always maintained protection of them. Felt it was important to help everyone out.
By land or by sea, first response volunteers have answered the call. Whether it was a father and son gasping for air in a rural lake.
I took off my boots and went in the water with them.
An injured mountain biker in a dense forest in desperate need of medical attention.
There were storms coming in that day, and we were racing against time.
A ravaging fire ripping through an apartment complex, endangering the lives of its occupants.
Then I heard like a whoosh of wind, so I said, well, I thought it was raining, so I got up and opened the door. It was nothing but fire.
Or a clear day, suddenly darkened by the tragedy of a major accident, which spread fire, smoke, death, and debris over a Connecticut roadway.
Oh, I have a very good recollection. Everything is imprinted in my memory, what exactly happened. It was a regular morning, beautiful morning, sunny day.
I was just on my way to work. Typical Friday morning, beautiful sunny day, about 7:50 in the morning. Travel on Route 44 like I do every day.
I was in the left center lane at the light. Truck number 8 from American Crushing and Recycling had lost its brakes and clutch and transmission apparently higher up on the mountain, so it came flying down the mountain.
And then I spotted the truck coming towards us.
The operator tried to make it through the intersection, was unable.
Lost its control and hit the vehicle in front of him. And then the truck tipped over and spilled its content on the road. There was lots of big rocks, cement, sand, all the debris.
And it all just kind of unfolded right in front of me. I was lucky enough, I basically locked up my brakes and kind of skidded to the right. I got my truck over to the side of the road. Some cars started getting twisted around and flipped over, and there's just dirt flying everywhere, cars flying everywhere, debris flying everywhere.
He continued to plowing through the intersection, and it was like a domino effect.
And hit 18 cars and a commuter bus with, I think there was 17 people on the bus.
And the big gray wall of dust and something were coming towards me, and then everything went black.
And then the truck caught fire, just kind of exploded right in front of me, and it was just instant chaos. I had my portable radio for my police job on the seat next to me. I grabbed that and jumped out of the car and just started running towards the accident, basically screaming for help into the radio, just trying to get people coming, because I knew it was pretty bad. It was pretty enormous scene. The first car I got to was this small blue car, and tried to, there was a woman in it, unconscious. Tried to get the door open, the driver's door. Couldn't get it open. It was just smashed shut.
The fuel tank was ruptured, and it caught a spark and already set on fire.
and there was just 4 or 5 inches of dirt on the road at that point. I just started picking up dirt and throwing it on the fire, the gas tank, trying to keep that down. Just screaming for people to help me.
I thought I was dreaming, and it was a very bad, unpleasant dream. I almost felt nauseous.
There was another gentleman on the other side of the car who had tried to do the same thing I did. I was able to throw my knife to him. He cut the seatbelt.
And then I thought I saw an angel in my car. So what is an angel doing here?
And I dragged her out through the passenger window. She was just, unconscious. It was just a bloody mess.
Somebody in white was in my car calling me and asking me to follow him. While he was taking me out of the vehicle, he burned his arm because as he was pulling me out of the car, the flames were already in the back seat. So it was just the moments from the moment where the car got inflamed.
We dragged her to the side of the road and turned her off to some guy who said he was a doctor, and that was good enough for me at that point. And then we just went back to pulling people out of cars and trying to get people off the bus, and it was just an incredibly chaotic scene.
After that, I woke up on the grass.
If I had left her to go further on, she certainly wouldn't have made it. But I was glad I was able to get her out and get some of the other people out too. Give them a chance.
I wasn't even sure if I'm gonna live after that. I thought I'm definitely going into coma now, and I may not wake up again.
It was something out of a movie. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a very large-scale operation that started at 7:30 in the morning, didn't end until 10 o'clock at night.
Passers-by and witnesses also volunteered to care for the caregivers.
Some people were there and assisted us with taking care of us, as the incident went on, and making sure that the firefighters and all the first responders were being fed and hydrated and those types of things. A nearby restaurant provided food for the incident. They didn't have to do those types of things. They chose to do those types of things. So there's a lot of those stories.
Stories so compelling that accident victim Mark Robinson has decided to write a book about the event called Smoke, Fire, and Angels.
It was a tremendous outpouring of concern for people's fellow man. It is just an enormously incredible story of what people did that day. Close to 300 people descended on the scene. They came from everywhere. They came from nearby businesses, passers-by, obviously the local police and firemen, Lifestar from above, east, west, north, south. People came from every direction to help us that day, and thank God for that. When that truck hit, it spread this trail of destruction for almost 200 yards, and there were up to a dozen of us who were really truly involved in life and death struggles in the immediate aftermath of that crash. So there were some people in desperate need of immediate help, and people got to us very quickly.
The very nature of volunteer emergency service requires immediate response and personal sacrifice.
You've started the day before the light comes up in the winter. It's snowing. You drive to work. You work a full day. Usually put in an extra whatever time it takes to get your job done. You go home. There's still everything at home that needs to be done. The dinner has to be cooked, and all the routines that you need to do at home. Snowstorm turns into a blizzard. You finally take a hot bath, you put your pajamas on, all you're thinking about is your head hitting that pillow, and the phone rings, and it's a 9-year-old boy who went out to look for his dog in a snowstorm. The dog's come home, and the boy hasn't. At that point, the adrenaline kicks in, and you have the skills, all the training, all of the hours that you spent to develop the skills that could be used in the time of an emergency come into play now. And so you get your gear, throw the gear in the car, put on your uniform, call the dog, and you spend an hour or 2 hours fighting the snowstorm to get there, and get there at midnight to begin the search. And then your day begins.
Her 9-to-5 gig is typical of a telecommunications engineer at Travelers Insurance, minus the pocket protector. The mild-mannered employee, however, lives a double life. At any moment, Marion Beeland could be asked to drop everything to find a lost boy or a confused senior citizen in the forest. Marion would draft Tracer, her trained rescue dog, to lead the way.
And when we arrive at the search, there's a whole group of people that has turned out with their special skills. I'm the dog handler. We go into the field. The EMT is there. The person that knows how to navigate is there. The communication specialist is there. They have CERT people organizing, holding together, creating a place so that we could park, directing traffic. All those people came out of their nice warm homes, their nice warm beds, to be able to make the mission successful, bringing to the table what they have.
Ready, set, fire!
Today we were doing a drill where the dog was rewarded for finding someone. The dog has to be able to find a stranger.
Right there? Oh, good boy! Did you find him? All right, I'm coming.
It is not unusual for Marion and Tracer to work with another search team.
Who's gonna be? You'll be ground. We'll get you.
He's coordinating.
Salmon.
that.
We'll have you as Thames, or
Okay,
you as Thames,
okay.
you as Salmon.
All right.
You'll be ground team 4, right?
Correct. Okay.
All right. All right. Once again, we got the Hartford Airport here,
Yep.
and they're saying it's somewhere over here by the Salmon River.
This team, the Civil Air Patrol, a civilian auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force, may coordinate a search from terra firma, but in no time at all they're airbound, providing a bird's eye view in emergency scenarios, often over Long Island Sound.
Civil Air Patrol is not a job to me. It's almost, it seems to be like it's a way of life for some people. It's a structured environment, great for cadets education, myself. I just enjoy flying. I've had many years of flying, and this is my way to actually give back to society.
On patrol, Lenny Kimball may coordinate below with the Westbrook Volunteer Fire Department Marine Patrol pilot Aidan Mealy to find lost or injured boaters.
I personally, last weekend, we had a call where we were pulling, we assisted a number of people off a vessel that had gone aground on some rocks, precariously with a number of children on board. Out here, if your boat catches on fire or it sinks, you now have a whole other peril. You're in the water, so now you have to survive the water, whether hypothermia, whether it be drifting, whether just fatigue of keeping yourself afloat. All those things come into factor, and that's why we wanted to provide the service, and we got this vessel to do that.
Once a victim is brought ashore, and if their next destination is Lawrence and Memorial Hospital in New London, then volunteer paramedic unit driver Nancy Wado may be responsible for the transport as well as assisting the paramedic. One recent morning, Nancy and her paramedic partner Marie Waters tended to household accidents, illnesses, and a pair of traffic accidents.
It's a little scary. You want to really be careful because you don't know what the other people are going to do.
Typically, Nancy finds herself at a scene with local firefighters, career and volunteer, depending on the community. While their numbers are dwindling, volunteer firefighters are still the most prolific first responders in the state.
In the volunteer service, we have all kinds of people, and we have all kinds of jobs for them. There are some of them that don't like to climb ladders. We have other work for them. There are some of them don't want to go into a burning building, but they love to drive the truck. We let them drive the truck. There are some of them that, one person, for example, that we have in our department is a photographer, and he is our department photographer. And we love the work that he does. So those are examples, and there are administrative people, people who keep the department going behind the scenes. We need them all, and when you put them all together, the department goes.
I joined the Ladies Auxiliary, and a lot of people go, big deal, it's another social circle. Ladies Auxiliary do an awful lot of good, and they help to raise funds for their volunteer fire departments generally. But we also served at fires. We were always the ones who had the meals prepared, the coffee prepared, lots of water, lots of cold drink at the scenes. So, people serve in a variety of capacities, and I always love to tell people, take what interests you and build on that.
Thank you for joining us. I know that you're enjoying this compelling program on Watch. Now we're asking for you to get involved. It's an interactive program, if you will. This is a good time to remember. It's been 7 years since 9/11. It's a good time to remember how much we all realize just how important first responders are in our communities. And with hurricanes bearing down on us, it's a good time to think about how terrible a disaster can be and how it can hit any one of our communities. We're particularly vulnerable to that here in Connecticut. So what we're asking for tonight, we're not asking for your dollars, we are asking for your help. We are looking for you to say, this is my time to volunteer. We're looking for you to think back to those days of 9/11 when we all reached out into our communities and said, how can I be of help? When we all looked at firefighters and police and all sorts of disaster emergency people and said, wow, look at what these people are doing. How can I be of help? Because we have ways for all of you to help, and that's what we're asking you to do. We want you to call us to volunteer at 1-877-962-JOIN. Now, we have a panel of people that are going to be taking your phone calls. You're going to find out tonight there are many, many ways that you can volunteer. You don't have to be prepared to run into a burning building in order to be a first responder. We can use your skill set. We can use your help. Tonight, we're going to be talking to some of the people who make the emergency services happen in our state and who take care of us in times of need. James Thomas is our Commissioner of the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Thank you for being with us tonight. Leonard Gersha is the Chief of Operations of the Department of Public Health and the head of the DMAT unit. Mario Bruno is the COO of the Charter Oak chapter of the American Red Cross. And Rick Westman is Deputy Chief of the East Hartford Fire Department, but he also is the head of USAR, the Urban Search and Rescue Teams. And boy, do we want to make sure that the day that that 911 call goes out, that your team is there and is prepared and is ready to go. Commissioner, I'm going to start with you. Are there certain parts of our state where volunteers are needed more than others? We saw in the program 73% of our state depends on volunteers. Are there certain parts where we're having more trouble recruiting and retaining volunteers?
Yeah, I think the people who are watching the show actually know where the voids are. As Chief Austin had indicated in the tape we had just seen, very few other than the urban areas had paid full-time fire departments. So there's always a need. Volunteer Ambulance Association, police departments are looking for people to get involved with the, we call VIPs, Volunteers and Police Service, Community Watch Block. We have CERT teams, a big thing that's happened in Connecticut. Connecticut has been named the #1 state in the country, if you will, for flagship. We call CERT teams, Community Emergency Response Teams, and we have people in the urban areas involved. Hartford is graduating somebody this week, a whole new class, and we've had an earlier class from Hartford. We have seniors who have done it in housing complexes. So there is such a need anywhere in the state. The fire service needs them. We need them in the CERT program. Today, just to give you a statistic, about 2,300 people have joined the Citizen Emergency Response Teams in Connecticut. About 60% of the communities have a team which go out and help the fire departments, the police department, and emergency management. So we are making progress, but we need a lot more help.
Have demographics worked against us in this state? We know we have an aging population. We have people who tend to commute much further than they did even 10 years ago in order to get to their jobs. Does that work against us in terms of having volunteers on hand, ready to answer the call in the case of a fire, an emergency like that, an accident on the highway?
Yes, it definitely can work against us because they can live in this town, they're commuting to another. Fortunately, a lot of the businesses, and maybe if they're listening tonight, will let their employees in that community take the ambulance, be members of the Volunteer Ambulance Corps, or leave that place of employment, help out on the fire department if it's necessary. But it is a difficult process to get people engaged. But I will say this, that every single incident we have in Connecticut and in 169 towns, it's a local incident. The best people who know the community, who want to get involved and get engaged, for really no money, they want to give something back. We're asking them, volunteer. There's so many things they can do. And this is the opportunity as we go through the show tonight to see the many facets in emergency services and public safety.
Now, you can call from anywhere in the state tonight, and we have people here who can answer questions about where you can be used. It doesn't matter what part of the state you're in. You can call us. We have an expert panel here sitting right behind all of us who are ready to pick up the telephone. It's 1-877-962-JOIN. If you call, someone will either be able to answer your questions now or someone will get back to you quickly. So it's 1-877 1-877-962-JOIN. I'm not asking for any dollars tonight, but I am asking for your help. We need each one of you to call. Leonard Gersha is joining us. You're the head of Chief of Operations for the Department of Public Health, but one of the units that we've heard about, got some news coverage when it got started, is the DMAT unit. We've also heard about this wonderful field hospital that we can deploy, which was named for Adelie Lundgren, who was the woman who died in the anthrax poisoning in Connecticut. Who works in DMAT, and how can people get involved with that?
The DMAT team is a disaster medical assistance team, and it's anyone who has any skill at all. We're looking for volunteers, not just physicians and nurses and EMTs and paramedics, but we're looking for people to help us with logistics, plumbers and electricians, those that can help us with running electrical cables, someone who might want to volunteer in the hospital to be comfort to patients that come to the hospital. We're very fortunate in Connecticut to have a very robust volunteer community across all the services, as the Commissioner pointed out. We're looking for volunteers. We're obviously always looking for medical volunteers, but we're also looking for volunteers to be part of the deployment of the hospital. We're partnered with the Medical Reserve Corps in Middletown, who are part of our logistics team to set up the hospital. We're partnered with other volunteer fire organizations around the state, training them on how to use the equipment so that if there is a disaster in our state, they will come in and help the state folks to set the equipment up, and then it will be used locally at a local hospital, maybe set up in a field in a school somewhere close to a disaster area, or if we ever had a large-scale infectious disease outbreak, we would use it to help quarantine and isolate patients.
And that's something we need to talk about, but I want to ask you specifically right now, if you have another language that you speak, boy, could we use your help. Connecticut is a very diverse state, and when there are emergencies and we have shelters set up, we need people who can speak to the local people in the dialects that they speak. 1-877-962-JOIN is the number to call, and even if you say that's your only skill, that you speak another language, that is a skill that can very much be used. You were mentioning that in some parts of eastern Connecticut, we have how many dialects of Chinese being spoken?
There's over a dozen out in eastern Connecticut, folks who speak different dialects. And we're always in need of folks that can help us translate and help us to break down some of the fear barriers. Folks who come to live in Connecticut, especially from other parts of the world, the uniforms at times can be very intimidating, and to help bridge that gap. So we're looking for volunteers, even just someone to answer the phone.
And something as simple as a cultural knowledge. You set up a shelter, you're trying to feed people, you bring in food that people are not familiar with or are not comfortable with eating, maybe it's against their dietary restrictions. You need that kind of help. You need guidance from people to be able to tell you that.
Absolutely. And one other point of the need for volunteers is even those that might have a disability, we need your expertise in helping in our planning to make sure that we're getting it correct, to make sure that we have the appropriate facilities to care for every resident and visitor to our state.
The number to call is 1-877-962-JOIN. We have many telephones here that are not ringing. We could really use your help. Mario Bruno is joining us. He's with the American Red Cross. Mario, one of the things that you did was you coordinated Connecticut's response to 9/11. How does Connecticut help out in a situation like that, so massive and with so many other organizations, both career and volunteer, in the immediate area?
Well, one thing that we did for 9/11, and the Red Cross is really an organization that is led by volunteers, so we can use volunteers at any level. And we had several volunteers that actually managed parts of the operation, parts of the response to New York City. We actually, the first volunteer from outside of New York to arrive to New York City came from Madison, Connecticut, and she managed the mental health response to the entire operation in New York. So it's really a matter of finding volunteers from all walks of life. We need people who can lead a team or who can pick up phone calls. It really takes a massive response to respond to something like 9/11 or Katrina or anything that may happen in Connecticut. And I think a neat thing about some of the organizations in the state is that we can provide training, we can get you ready for that big emergency that may happen in the future, places like the Red Cross will send you to other states to respond to disasters. We actually have about 70 volunteers that have responded to the hurricanes down the coast, and then you'll come back home and be more ready to respond to the next disaster.
But the thing we need to stress is that people tend to reach out after a big disaster. After Katrina, everyone wanted to help. We can't wait until the disaster happens. We need people to call now and get their training and be ready to go. And with the Red Cross, you can be available for a big disaster out of state. You could be available for overnight. People need help after a fire in their own hometown, but you need them now.
The need is now. People need to call right now. They need to volunteer for any organization they want to volunteer for. There's a lot of training involved that needs to take place before the disaster.
Right.
That way you'll know where you may be needed the most. We'll know where you are. You'll know how to contact us, and we'll all become part of a really big team of all the organizations that are actually sitting here right now. And it really is a very coordinated response when it happens. Something that we learned after 9/11 was that we all had to coordinate. And ever since 9/11, we have really gotten to a point where you can volunteer for one organization and get trained by the other organization and really be part of that community team, that community emergency response team. You'll see CERT teams that are actually opening shelters. You'll see public health teams that are helping the Red Cross. It's a great thing, and we couldn't be more thankful to our volunteers.
And I want to emphasize that you're maybe saying now, I'm too busy, I have a job, I have a family. Whatever number of hours you can give, we can find a way to use you. If you can only give a few hours a month or a few hours every few months, we'll find a place for you and we'll find a place for your skill set. The number is 1-877-962-JOIN. Also joining us is Rick Westman of the Urban Search and Rescue Team, USAR. What sorts of situations does USAR come into play with?
USAR is a group of people that are trained in multidisciplinary type jobs. Normally we would respond to something, for example, a building collapse. And the team has been deployed about 4 times over the course of its inception. We've gone full team activations and we've gone partial team activations for specific types of equipment. In the event of something like that happening, you would get approximately 100 to 140 people to respond as an Urban Search and Rescue Task Force to provide aid and service to search for victims of a collapse.
Now, we people will think of the 9/11, but we can also think about in our own state, there have been a number of times when a building has blown up from a gas leak, or, for instance, a lot of people remember L'Ambiance Plaza when that apartment building was under construction and it came down. So you're looking for people with all sorts of skill sets, including people who do operate cranes, who run heavy equipment, people who maybe haven't thought this is something that could really be useful.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that it's an all-volunteer team, but we do have people from career departments, volunteer departments. We do have people from local and state police, and we do have people from the private sector to make up this team. We do look for special skill sets. It's a very demanding team position. Any of the positions on the team is very demanding. We would like to see more people like structural engineers, and we are specifically looking for structural engineers if there's anybody out there that's interested. One of the other things that we look for are people with medical backgrounds, people with heavy machinery backgrounds, construction backgrounds, and things of that nature. Those all help us to do our job and to do it better.
If anybody remembers those accidents, the Civic Center collapse, or fortunately those people had just left L'Ambiance Plaza, there were construction workers on site, you can understand how an engineer is needed in order just to be able to explain how do we get in there and start to take this apart. So we're structural engineers, if you're listening, we really need you. 877-962-JOIN to volunteer. Commissioner, we were talking a little bit also about programs for state employees. We have a large body of state employees here who have been given an opportunity, they may not even realize it, to be of service.
We're very fortunate because our governor made a commitment last year during the hurricane season. Let's make sure we have people pre-trained, as Mario had indicated. So the state, working through the governor's office and Red Cross, trained about 600 state employees who went away for the day training so they can work in the shelters if we need them in Connecticut or if they have to be deployed out of state. The one thing that anybody who's thinking about joining any event, whether it be the Police Explorer program, a Fire Cadet program, a CERT program, we will provide the training to you at no cost to you as an individual. The CERT team members, it's just 25 hours approximately, you will get trained. If you get trained, we, the state of Connecticut, will indemnify you, take the responsibility.
Good point, because I'm wondering if people are sitting out there thinking, could I get sued by being a good Samaritan?
Right. The key thing for us is training is so critical. Again, the Police Explorer programs, the fire academies, the CERT, if they get activated, they will contact our office. It happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We make the approval and grant it within a minute. Their team is covered for workers' comp, any liability, and it's covered under our statute, under Homeland Security Title 28. So all protections are there, but please join, get the training. As all the people have talked about, we need people to work the books, accountants, people to answer phones. If you don't want to go into the burning building, but you can drive the truck, you can help us. It's interesting, many years ago we had a Police Explorer program in a couple of departments that I was the chief at. 95% of those men and women are in police or fire service today. Once you get it in, you can't get it out of your system.
Yeah, well, we want to really encourage you, as you heard the commissioner saying, if you're an accountant, if you're a business person, we will find a way to use your skill set. I know that sometimes it's not appealing to volunteer when you think you're just going to show up in an office and somebody will ask you to pick up a telephone or lick some envelopes to send out fundraising letters. Believe me, if you can tell us what your skill set is tonight, we will find a niche for you in your community using what you do best. 1-877-96-2JOIN is the number to call. Leonard, I want to go back to you for a minute to talk about public health emergencies, something that maybe we haven't thought about that much, but we may have thought about more after the anthrax emergency. Maybe we're thinking about it now in terms of a pandemic flu. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not an EMS person. Could I be of help if there were a need for a big emergency with a lot of medical response, for instance, medication?
Absolutely. We can use volunteers as part of our planning statewide. We're planning with our local health partners to run points of distribution if we needed to give out appropriate medications,
You're talking about maybe an antibiotic, an antiviral?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep, and what we would need is to move large populations through predetermined locations, and we would need people to be greeters, we would need people to be communicators. Back to the language piece, we would need people to just be helping hands to calm the residents of their neighborhood, help guide people through.
Because you could be talking about thousands of people within a 48-hour period.
50,000 people per point of distribution pod that we've set up in our plan, so we can use all the help we can get.
Mario, I'm going to give you one last chance to make a pitch for the various kinds of people that you could use at the Red Cross. We have about 30 seconds left.
We can use anyone, and we have a position for everyone. I think the important thing is you also have to make sure that you're prepared at home for the next emergency. If you just sign up to volunteer for an organization and you're not ready in your home, if you don't have a plan to take care of your family, you're not going to be available to help us. So also make sure that you are prepared at home. There's several programs out there. There's ready.gov and redcross.org, places where you can find information. But really just call us and tell us what your skills are. We need you. We need you now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if I can make a pitch that's better than that, but we do need you, and as I said, we promise you that we will find a place for you that will accommodate your time constraints, that will accommodate your driving constraints. We can use people who have disabilities. We need their help and their advice. We can use people from all communities all the way across our state. 73% of our state depends on volunteers as emergency responders, whether it's a fire, an accident, or a natural disaster. The number to call is 1-877-96-2JOIN. People are waiting to pick up your call now. Volunteer fire companies are often made up of career police and firefighters who want to give back in their hometowns. Medical professionals often give back through medical response teams and the unit known as DMAT.
We can be stood up within 2 to 4 hours to set up something similar to what you see behind me as an initial triage treatment center.
Our team opened up one of the first hospitals that was able to receive patients in the city of New Orleans. There are 5 people from our team vaccinated their entire staff and made sure that they are able to go back to work and do what they do.
While DMAT is prepared to respond to major emergencies and evacuations, veterinarian Dr. Arnold Goldman says Hurricane Katrina taught us that we must also be ready to evacuate pets to prevent the human victims from returning to a danger zone to retrieve their 4-legged loved ones and feathered friends.
Hello? Hello? And those people will be told at that time to move with their pets. And when they get where they're going, whatever the host community is, there'll be cages and bowls for pets and cots and whatever else is needed for people. And we will set up an animal shelter anywhere in any weather. Now we have 3 trailers, each 24 feet long, with 750 cages and 1,500 bowls and everything else you can imagine.
The myriad of volunteer specialists, such as mountain bike rescue personnel and ham radio operators, provide our society with services that communities could not possibly afford.
Our mountain bikers know that area like they know the back of their hand. Something I cannot teach my uniform people or drill in my uniform people so that they can be available to do that 24/7. So in that way, the volunteers that comprise the mountain bike rescue team are invaluable to me.
Mountain biking is something I love to do, and it's really my give back both to the sport and the town of Manchester, community service.
The same thing with the ham radio operators. I could run my people through and I could get them licensed as ham radio operators, but by maintaining a cadre of volunteers, I have over 50 ham radio operators.
And the object is to provide communications for the town in case there's an emergency. If the police radios go down, the fire radio go down, we can back them up.
We can set up mobile communications and just about talk to the world without any power. We can send emails and faxes and everything, even without the internet, through ham radio.
Those talents were recently called into action.
2 bikers had gone out early in the morning, 8 to 9 in the morning. Both experienced bikers, and both were familiar with the Case Mountain Recreation Area and the trail system. So familiar, as a matter of fact, that they didn't mind going off blaze trails and going into some areas that would otherwise be considered remote or inaccessible. One of the bikers was 71 years old.
And it so happens it was very wet, and we didn't realize it, and the particular rock was covered with moss, which we didn't see. It wasn't there last year. And so when I jumped up on that rock, the bike just disappeared and accelerated me into the ground, and I landed right on my hip. The instant I hit, I knew that I was not going to walk out. So it couldn't have been 5 minutes. We called 911 and got everybody coming after us.
This is a good thing for us because right off the bat, at the 911 dispatch center that receives the call, we get the coordinates of that cell phone. We know the longitude and latitude of where that call is coming from. That helps us when we're going to mount a search and rescue effort. On that particular call, we used 37 people, and 17 of those were first responders. All the remainders were volunteers. Here's where the bike rescue team is very important. They do what they call a hasty search.
We can hit the trails very quickly and search rapidly.
The ham radio operators were able to provide that interface to the command and also to the mountain bike team.
Hey, Command, this is Team 1. We are up in the woods. How do you read?
Team 1, this is Command. Roger, I'll get you loud and clear.
Hello!
Probably about 20 minutes. We were by his side with a bike rescue person.
Once we found Charlie, as it turns out, both Dave and myself knew Charlie. We've ridden with him before.
And I was a happy camper once I saw them because I knew I was in the right kind of hands.
Because I'm a ham radio operator, I was able to radio for additional assistance. Come to our location, we have found a victim. Glastonbury sent in a gator, and they sent in a second gator with a Stokes basket, and they were also able to bring in the paramedics.
They rode their ATVs as far as they could, and I'm not sure how far that was, but I know they had to do a lot of walking. So they had to pick up all their heavy gear, and they had to walk all the way up to me. And they were the next group, and they were the people I really wanted to see because I knew they had some morphine in the packet somewhere, and I needed some.
The ham radio operators traditionally operate a Skywarn system.
And there were storms coming in that day, and we were racing against time. They were very severe storms.
We're looking for any information on potential storm cells coming through the area in the next 15 or 20 minutes. Over.
Hey, I got a report of heavy storm activity from the west heading in your direction.
And they walked me out. It was hotter than blazes. They were sweating, and yet they were carrying me like I was some kind of precious cargo. And I said, oh man, I tell you, I got the right guys taking care of me.
And then we needed to load them on a gator.
And we just bounced forever until we got down to Line Street, where the ambulance was.
And we were kept in up to the date, up to the minute status of the storm, where it was, how far it was from us, what the winds were, whether there was severe lightning or whatever. So we knew exactly where the storm was and how much time we had. And after the gentleman was rescued, about a half an hour later, the skies opened up.
I'm afraid that if we didn't have our bike rescue team, if we didn't have our ham radio operators, if we did not have our navigators, then I'm afraid that we wouldn't provide as good a service as we do.
The quality of the search and rescue depends on much more than willing volunteers. In fact, you'll find few institutions and disciplines who train quite like emergency first responders. The volunteers say it keeps them engaged and sharp. Often the training starts very young through explorers programs, such as the EMT training in Meriden.
Hi, I'm Sean. Sean, I'm Jim, the paramedics. We're in ambulance number 2 today. Is this your first ride time with us? No. No? All right, well, this is one of our new ambulances, so let's do a quick check, see what's what.
There's also the Police Explorer program in Fairfield.
They get a hands-on, behind-the-scenes look at exactly what emergency services is all about. And that way, later on in life, they can make an informed career choice. So they're directing traffic, they're manning different tables and booths, providing information to people, and they also assist in any disasters that we have, and they're well-trained to help out, man shelters, things of that nature.
What is not at all unusual in this line of work is to find that these graduates often have emergency services in their DNA.
I have a big interest in law enforcement. I have a lot of cops in the family.
My daughter also got the bug and she joined.
And the minute you got out of high school, that was our goal.
I was 18, my brother was 19, and my cousin Ed was 20. We all joined the same day.
My oldest son, who's been here 14 years, the first time he stepped foot in the firehouse, he was less than a week old.
My son is the 4th generation here.
My family has always volunteered and given back to the community.
My grandfather was a firefighter in Hartford.
Both my grandfather was involved in it, my father currently still involved in it.
My brother was a member here. My dad remained chief until I took over from him.
I have 2 brothers that participate, and I'm very fortunate now I have a nephew who's also involved.
My grandfather was, and he started sometime in the early 30s, the same fire department that my brother and my dad and my son are on now.
Emergency first response work is so much a part of the Coles family of Glastonbury that once 4 family members from different emergency systems were all at the same accident scene.
My son, he responded on his bike when he was a kid.
It's a family business, I think. It's just always been something that we were raised with, and my dad and my mom were raised with, and obviously my children have also, had it instilled in them.
While a family affair, these volunteers admit that on more than one occasion, their volunteer activities sometimes took them from the firehouse to the doghouse.
With my wife, I think I was perpetually in the doghouse because it seemed like every time she wanted to do something, I had some fire department function, or I was off at a fire, or I was out with the club or something. And she usually referred to this firehouse with an adjective that wasn't too complimentary, nor should we mention in front of that camera.
I get a complaint once in a while. I put the firehouse first, and I think we all get that. But you know what? You can't schedule your emergencies.
Aidan Mealy and his wife found a solution to the dilemma. They're both members of the Westbrook Volunteer Firehouse.
Instead of just being the older way where it was up, I'm going down to the firehouse for the night. Now we can both go down and share the experiences and the rewards of volunteering.
The troop at the station can become a second family. That's the way it is at the Norwich East Great Plains Volunteer Fire Department. Recently, they needed all the comfort they could get from both home and firehouse families. A tragic fire tested their resolve.
It was a Friday night, early Saturday morning, and my cat was knocking on the back door. And I had been out with my friends, so normally when the cat goes outside, I let him stay outside. So then I heard like a whoosh of wind. So I said, well, I thought it was raining. So I got up, went opened the door. It was nothing but fire.
We never anticipated the heavy amount of fire we had on arrival. And it was very, very challenging. The fire was, the front building was, the whole roof was almost fully involved. And we're getting the ladder set up. Those guys are pulling hose off the truck as the engines are laying supply lines. I mean, the heat was amazing. The light, I mean, it lit up the night sky. As soon as you turn on the street, you could see the glow. And you could smell it as you're driving. As I drove past, you could smell the fire in the air.
The Norwich Peachtree Fire was especially difficult for two of the company's newest firefighters. They are both foreign-born and employees of the apartment building, which was going up in flames.
I thought my job is to get here and help to get the people out of here, so I drove stop here, asked the city chief what he needs for keys, and helped with the police and the city fire department to get the people out of here.
Basically, as soon as I show up, all the tenants, they was right outside here, make sure each tenant, they was here, and I saw all the tenants, and slowly when the fire started to slow down, my boss showed up here too, and we started to count all the people to make sure all the people that was saved in life, and everything it counted really good.
The entire complex of 120 apartment units was destroyed, leaving 160 people homeless. That's when volunteer organizations like the Salvation Army and the Red Cross often step in to help.
So we were there and able to be there for the Red Cross, to be able to do their client casework. We were able to set up 12 laptops. We had cell phones. We had satellite IP phones. We were able to give them communication radios so when they could move about and communicate with each other.
It's tough. I mean, you see people's entire lives, belongings just go right up in front of you despite your best efforts, and you're doing everything you can. It's still, I think it does kind of hit you where you live, because we like to help people as much as can and make things right, and sometimes the cards are stacked against you and it just doesn't happen.
Yes, I lost all my memories. They did the best they could, and no one got hurt, no one got injured. They were firemen from New London, they were firemen from Groton, they were firemen from Mystic, and they were all great. Even the police were great. I wanted to thank people because that's all I've been doing since this fire, is thanking people, because I'm here today.
Incidents such as the Peachtree Fire tested the system's ability to respond to a major disaster, something officials from the Connecticut Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security are keenly aware of, as are the communities on the front line.
And most of the times, we cannot prevent a disaster, but we can mitigate a disaster. And we can actually have a more efficient and effective response to a disaster.
When 9/11 occurred, all of us really wanted to give something, either money, blood, or donate time, go help some kind of way. Well, a CERT team is a team that's trained to come to your immediate assistance. What most people do not realize is that the people who are going to help you in a major disaster are not necessarily the first responders. They may be 3 or 4 minutes away. It's going to be the people around you who have the presence of mind to stop and help you survive the disaster.
In Connecticut, and I think throughout the United States in general, citizens have always been willing to step up, help each other, help a neighbor, and I think that's going to be the key for us.
The involvement of more people from neighborhoods is gaining importance as emergency volunteer organizations struggle with their diminishing numbers.
The recruitment and retention issue of the volunteer fire service is nationwide.
Exactly, and I think it's basically everywhere in the volunteer world throughout the country. Is the biggest issue is trying to balance, family, a job, what you like to do besides your firefighting, because as a volunteer firefighter and EMS, we also do that, takes up a lot of your time, just in training. The days of going over and, breaking windows and putting a hose in the hole until the fire goes out and, are over. Now people have expectations that when you arrive, you know what to do, that you're trained in what you do, and you do a good job at what you do. Now volunteers are also held accountable.
The local gas station operator, a small business operator, just can't leave his business like he used to respond to the call. The other interests of families and wives and children and all the Little League and the soccer moms and all of that stuff are just taking up so much of the time, while all the while the mandates and the training required by the state and federal rules that govern us now demand much more. It takes almost a year, 15 or 18 months to get somebody prepared to become a firefighter.
You know what? The National Fire Protection Association standards, there are OSHA standards, there are insurance industry standards, and all these different organizations don't seem to talk to each other. They say, well, you've got to put in another 40 or 50 hours a year of training or of something, and they don't understand. They're adding that on to everything else that's already there. So I think one of the things that the fire service has to do is to bring these all these organizations together and say, time out, you're killing the volunteers. We just can't go on like this. We've got to cut back a little bit.
The strain of regulations, training, and increased family responsibilities just adds to the day-to-day danger of being an emergency first responder.
I've a couple of times been trapped in buildings and have run out of breathing air. I've been in situations where a horrendous explosion could have occurred, and I would have been looking at it from ground zero.
Often the dangers go beyond the physical to the psychological effects of dealing with tragedy on a regular basis.
Many, many fatalities and many drownings in the river I've witnessed and been a part of. You know, that's a part of the business that you never really forget, but you know, you have to learn to live with it or you can't do this kind of thing. You know.
From injured children to serious fires, fatalities, we get it all. We've seen it all over the years. These are incidents that tax you to the max.
In an effort to improve the plight of the volunteer, the state has passed a bill protecting the rights of volunteers in the workplace. Some communities are offering small pensions and other incentives, and in the corporate arena, some companies value the contributions of their workers in their communities.
I believe that most of our peers and most of corporate America is very supportive of volunteerism, and in fact there's a trend right now to look at different ways to better organize volunteerism to have real clear impact on the community and to support some of the corporate initiatives that companies are investing in.
We are so glad that you decided to join us for On Watch. This is the interactive part of the program. You've been watching some very compelling testimony from volunteers who've talked about the differences that they've made in people's lives. You've heard from some of the victims. Now we're asking you to become part of that volunteer corps. I want to stress that we need emergency first responders. We're looking for people with all kinds of skill sets. If you're the kind of a person who might be interested in joining a fire company and going into a burning building, we certainly need you. But if that's the furthest thing that you can imagine yourself doing, if that's the furthest from your mind, we can use you too. Your fire companies can use you. The emergency responders can use you. There is a job, no matter what your skill set is, we'll find a way to make it work. 1-877-962-JOIN is the number to call. We have a panel full of people waiting to take your phone calls. They'll take all your information and we'll find a place for you. So please give us a call, 1-877-962-JOIN. I have a panel of people here joining me this evening. Michael Picaro is here. He's the Director of the Office of Emergency Management of the town of Vernon. Thank you. Frank Borges is the producer of this wonderful program, On Watch, an Emmy Award-winning producer. Thank you for being here. Jonathan Hardy is the District Emergency Coordinator of the American Radio Relay League, also known as Ham Radio Operators, or HAMS. Jeff Morissette is here too. He is the State Fire Administrator for the Commission on Fire Prevention and Control. Jeff, we depend for 73% of the emergency first responders in this state, we depend on volunteers. The largest number of emergency first responders are firefighters. Not everybody is cut out to do it, but some volunteer firefighters have said to me, you might be surprised what you find yourself doing.
That's correct. There's many roles for individuals looking to serve as volunteers within their communities. Within the fire service, I think as was mentioned in the documentary, there's many support roles that individuals can serve. They can serve in capacities such as clerical support for the administrative functions for the operation of the department. They can provide rehabilitation services at an incident. They can also provide financial support in terms of many departments rely very heavily upon fundraising for their operations within the department
When you
itself.
talk about rehabilitation at a scene, it could be as simple as what we saw that firefighter. He was lying in the grass, he had ice over him, I guess he'd gotten overheated and he was being attended to.
Correct. Again, we work very closely with emergency medical services, and many volunteer fire departments are served in the same communities by volunteer ambulance services. But in addition to that, we have ladies auxiliary services which provide fluids at the scene of an incident to emergency volunteers.
What if people say, but I'm not in my community 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, therefore, how could I be on call? How could I be a firefighter or an EMS?
Again, as a volunteer, you're actually on call 24 hours a day, but are not able to provide those services unless you're actually in the community or can respond in a timely manner. So all departments are looking for individuals who can provide services at all times of day. Many shortages actually occur during the weekdays, where many of our volunteers have to travel for their primary employment, so they're not available. So particularly individuals who work second and third shift would be of value to a volunteer organization in terms of daytime response.
1-877-962-JOIN is the number to call. I'd like to emphasize to you that we are looking for people with all kinds of skills. The services will provide the training that you need, but if you're an accountant, we could use you. If you're a CPA, we could use you. If you're a structural engineer, we have an entire team that could use your services. If you have medical responsibilities, if you even are just an animal lover, we're going to tell you how you can get involved too. Michael Porcaro is joining us. He's the director of the Office of Emergency Management in the town of Vernon. One of the things that we saw for many years, particularly in small towns, was that the firehouse was the center of the social life of the town. And that probably brought a lot of people in who might not have otherwise volunteered, but it was the place to be. Do we see that anymore? Is that still happening in Connecticut?
We do, and that's a great point. Being a volunteer in your local community, especially with your local emergency services, fire department in particular, gives you the opportunity to really become part of something bigger than yourself. And that camaraderie, that social aspect is still very important. It's still very alive and well. And the more volunteers that we can get involved will continue to reinvigorate that aspect of volunteerism at the local level.
Frank, when you were producing this program, I think you saw a lot of that, the camaraderie, and also the feeling that people want to be something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of something that matters.
Yeah, I mean, people are involved in their church groups and they're involved in their civic groups, and why not get involved in their fire department? Why not get involved in EMT? I mean, I think it was such a great thrill for these folks to go out and save someone's life or to help someone that it wasn't at all a chore. I mean, it was something they really enjoyed, and they didn't know how much they really enjoyed it until they did it. So I would implore the people who are watching at home that if they're still tuned in and they're watching us, it's because there's they have some type of feeling for what we're talking about here, and they should call up today. They don't have to commit. You're not committing to anything by calling today, but what you are doing by calling is saying, hey, I'm interested, I'm in my community, I have a responsibility, and I think I would like to know my neighbors and do it in a way that might be fun and important. So again, I would just like to suggest to the people at home that to call up. I just think it's that important. I think if you live in a neighborhood, there might be a little old lady who lives down the street or a person with a disability in your neighborhood that you want to be attending to in a situation. And so these folks who are on the phone can help you figure out how to do that. But I just like to say, as far as making this television show, that it has been one of the great pleasures to do, because I met so many wonderful people who do it just because they love it and because they care about the people in their communities. I was totally inspired. I was really thrilled to have been a part of this.
We can tell. Comes through. I want to say that we are not asking for your dollars tonight. I know you expect us to ask for that. We're not expecting you to give any money. We are looking for your time, whether you can give an hour a month, whether you can give an hour a week, whether you can be committed 24 hours a day. We need you to call us now at 877-962-JOIN to volunteer. As Frank said, you won't have to make the commitment tonight, but tonight is the time to call and talk to the experts. We have a studio full of people here who work in all sorts of emergency services positions, and they can answer your questions about what would be the right job for you, and believe me, there is one for you. Ham radio operators. when everything else goes down, when everything goes bad, when the cell phones can't get out, when the landlines are down, you guys are there. A lot of times before that as well, but when the chips are down, it's ham radio operators.
Well, no disaster, big or small. For instance, it doesn't have to be on the scale of the larger disasters we've seen tonight. When we've had the bridge collapse in the Midwest, another great example, problem that we found was phone systems got too overburdened. Didn't work. So ham radio was used even in smaller scale situations like that. I look around this room and it was kind of funny coming here tonight because we're in the unique area where we provide and work with a lot of these various organizations here. We work with CERT teams, we work with Civil Air Patrol as well, and it's a brotherhood, it's a fraternity, there's a lot of camaraderie that kind of goes along with it as well. And one point I wanted to make based on what my counterparts just said was if you turn the TV dial tonight, you're going to find a lot of things in news broadcasts what's wrong with America. You come right here, you see everybody in this room is really working on what's right with this country. And volunteerism is a great way to do it no matter what your capability is.
And boy, once you get involved with ham radio, people just get all into it. It becomes a huge hobby. It's almost a life force.
Yes, and we got to kind of hide some of our purchases sometimes where we have a little bit of fun. But one of the things mentioned earlier was Skywarn during the Manchester incident and the weather component. People wonder, well, maybe I'm not that capable to jump on a mountain bike or, jump in an ATV or something. We're a great service for people also with disabilities. Our Skywarn coordinator for this area, Roger, happens to be blind. And you wouldn't know it if you heard him on the radio. The services that he provides are top-notch and great, so we also encourage people with disabilities to join us as well.
And it's a wonderful hobby, I know that. 1-877-96-2-JOIN is the number to call. We have people who are standing by. We have phones that are not ringing right now. We have a lot of people on the phones, but quite a few people who are ready to take your call. If you have even the slightest interest, this is the time to check it out. We'll find a way to use you, whether you can apply for one-time only help for a big disaster, or whether you can be available when there's something small or a fire overnight. You can go to the scene and help somebody, hand out sandwiches or do other things. We need your help now. So to volunteer, 1-877-96-2-JOIN. Melissa Gugliotti is joining us, and she is a fire department volunteer in the town of Avon. She's actually the vice president of the department. You were saying to me that sometimes you surprise yourself. When you joined, did you expect to be doing the kinds of things that you do now?
No, absolutely not. I actually had no background in emergency services at all, and I actually joined on to be the photographer, thinking that that was a good way to give back to the community. And next thing I know, I've got bunker gear on and I'm at the fire academy running into a training simulation and getting trained to be a firefighter, and I love it to this day. We also, at our community, we have a volunteer group that runs a Citizens Fire Academy, and there's townspeople that join us, and I've taken, people from all walks of life that didn't think that they could run the jaws of life or didn't think that they could throw a ladder, and taught them that they can do it, and they've enjoyed it, and they've actually joined our ranks, and it's been quite a fulfilling thing to do.
And if anybody doesn't realize just how fulfilling that can be, all they need to do is to remember back to the big accident on Avon Mountain. You were there, and I can't imagine a more distressing and disturbing place to be, but a more life-affirming place. There are people who would not be living today had you and your colleagues not been there, and there were 300 of you there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite a life-changing experience for many people. I was one of the first people on scene. I was actually commuting to my day job, and 5 minutes earlier I would have probably been involved in the accident. So to turn that around and be able to get out of my car and grab a hose and try and save some lives is something that's, you can't describe it until you've done it.
It was interesting that day how many people happened to be passing through the scene who jumped out of their cars and had skills that they could offer. And somebody has to coordinate all that. Somebody has to figure out who's taking people out of the cars, who's creating triage on the lawn of a furniture store, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, you've said it a couple of times, and that there's something for everybody to do. Even a chief's assistant to sit in the car and write things down and make sure he knows where everybody is at all times, and especially in big incidents like that. And also being on the board of directors. We run our own corporation. We're an independent corporation, and we're constantly looking for people with business backgrounds and accounting backgrounds, anybody that can assist us. And a lot of times those people do end up becoming firefighters, surprisingly so.
The number to call is 1-877-962-JOIN. I also want to mention that, Melissa, you were saying that there is a Citizens Academy. People can actually come try it out and see if they're cut out for it. I know a lot of other towns do that too. Michael, how do you work We talked a little bit, and Frank had an excellent segment that we just saw about people who have emergency services in their DNA. Their grandfathers did it, their aunt did it, their uncle did it, their brother does it. But with so many people in Connecticut spreading out, moving to different towns, how do you attract people who maybe their uncle did it, but maybe he was in Iowa? Now they're in Connecticut. They don't have that connection.
Well, I think that's a great point. Beyond the honor and beyond the satisfaction of volunteering to help save the lives and protect the property of people in your community, really the volunteerism aspect of the job will help you become part of your community, really embedded into your community. And I think that's an important part. And you see that quite a bit. You see families and generations of families who pass down that honor from one generation to the other, and that's an important part. The other thing that I think that's very important to point out as well is that not only are you helping your neighbors and you're helping your community, but you're also helping yourself and you're helping your family. What we've seen over the past several years with major disasters and even in some of the local community disasters is that if you're better prepared, if you have a family disaster plan, if you're able to prepare your family, you'll be able to better respond, and you'll be able to not only protect your community but also protect your family by volunteering, by being involved, and by getting the training that an emergency service volunteer will get.
And Frank, there's a wonderful story coming up. Sometimes it really hits home. Sometimes the emergency responders are the people who need the help.
Yeah, and again, I hate to keep saying it, but it gives us more motivation to call today because I can remember it from personal experiences when people come to my home or my folks' home and they come with such sensitivities and such caring and love and make you feel comfortable at a time when you're so anxious. That is so valuable. And I remember after an event like that in my life, how wonderful those people were and how much they mean to me and how warm it made me feel. And those are the people that we're talking about. And I get a feeling that there's a little bit of that in everyone. And that's why I'm suggesting that more people call, because I do believe it's not only that EMT operator, but you might be involved in your community just to make coffee for people in a homeless shelter. It could be that simple. So calling, again, is not a big commitment here or an obligation. Calling is just saying, listen, I'm calling because I want to know what's happening and what's happening in my community. It is my responsibility after all. And I think as Americans, we owe that to each other. But I'm not suggesting that it is an obligation. I'm suggesting we do it out of the love of brother and sister.
I agree with you. It's 1-877-962-JOIN. And trust me, we will find a way to use your skills. We understand that people have certain skill sets and that you might like to use those in your volunteer life. Maybe not. Maybe you want to do something completely different from what you normally do in your day job, if you will, in your volunteer life. Whatever the case, we're going to have a place for you in your community, a place that's convenient for you to get to, a place that will match your time, your skills, and the amount of effort that you can put in and the amount of time that you can give to your community. But please, 73% of the emergency first responders in our state are volunteers. Imagine picking up the phone to call 911 and there's no one to answer your call. 1-877-962-JOIN. I want to get back to our ham radio operators. When there is a specific case, for instance, a child is lost, a person with Alzheimer's wanders away, sometimes the ham radio operators are the people who can make the call that helps find those people by, I don't want to use the term triangulation, but almost a navigation system that you fellas and women are able to use.
Well, that's one of the areas that we're talking about earlier where we work with other groups.
Yeah.
A lot of members that are members of CERT teams, search and rescue teams, are also ham radio operators. One of the things that we do is we provide training, and whether you want to be part of that team or you want to become strictly an amateur radio operator, it doesn't matter. And we pair up a lot of different skills. And there's a lot of different things also in radio that people don't realize. People think it's like what you were saying earlier, oh, my grandfather or my uncle or somebody. We never hear that more than in amateur radio. That, oh, my grandfather was a ham radio operator. But there's a lot of different things today that can be done as well. We have digital communications, just like many services. You can learn that sort of stuff. Morse code is no longer a requirement, which has been the biggest barrier. A lot of people say, no.
Really?
We still like it if you know Morse code, don't get me wrong, but it is no longer a requirement.
Yeah.
And where else can you have so much fun learning so many different things? You can work with kids, and age is another thing. I've got volunteers that are 9 years old, and I have a friend of mine who's a volunteer that's 92.
Yeah.
So regardless of your age or ability, we'll find something that we can use you for.
1-877-962-JOIN. If any of these opportunities sound exciting to you, they are just the tip of the iceberg. No matter where you live in our state, we have an opportunity for you, and that number is a good one for you to call. Melissa, I want to ask you another question about being a woman and being in the fire service. There may be some of us who might say, I feel a little intimidated by that. It feels like a guy thing or a boys club. Did it feel that way to you?
No, absolutely not. Actually, we have a very large contingency of women on the Avon Volunteer Fire Department, and there's sisters, there's wives, there's children, there's a lot of women, and one of the things that we do for each other is try and support each other and show each other how we can do things. Maybe not the same way the guys do it, but there are definitely ways that we can do everything that they can and make it work for us, which is why, you could be any walk of life and still volunteer.
I want to say 1-877-962-JOIN is the number to call. We're going to be asking you for some information about yourself, but we want you to know that all of the training that you will need will be provided, and that the state has all kinds of programs that then break into regional and break into local communities, but the local community is where it all starts and where it all ends. And Melissa, when you got that phone call or when you were driving and saw that accident in Avon Mountain, nothing could bring that home more, I can't imagine.
No, that was definitely one of the moments in your life that you will never forget. But, being able to do something when you were there, not just stand by and look at it and go, what do I do?
Exactly. How many of us would want to be able to get out of the car and be of service, not just stand there and stare in horror,
Absolutely.
but to be able to help?
And a lot of it just comes with training. I mean, everybody asks you, well, how do you know what to do when you get to the accident, or how do you know when you run into a burning building? Well, the training in the beginning is very intense, but it's the knowledge that you need to be able to it's second nature, and it becomes something that's very comforting to have, actually. Is to know what to do.
This is obviously something that translates into our own lives. Now, we all know about the disasters that can happen. In Connecticut, we're in hurricane season. We're particularly vulnerable to that. We know that there can be other kinds of disasters. We saw what happened in Connecticut with an anthrax poisoning. My goodness, that was a small event, but imagine if that had been widespread. Think of all the accidents we see on the highways. Think of the fire that happened in your town last night or 2 towns away. There must be a way for you to volunteer to be a part of being that emergency response, of saving a life, of making someone survive a terrible time. 1-877-962-JOIN. Please call us right now.
Tucked away in the state forest on the Rhode Island border is a small town named after the very tradition of Connecticut volunteerism.
The town itself is peaceful. It's a bedroom community. There's no tax base here. Everybody that works out of town. There's a few small jobs in town.
So quaint is Voluntown that it drew the Gerard family to put down roots.
It's a small enough town. The school system was great.
After moving into town, the Gerards quickly made themselves at home, volunteering in town activities and joining church and civic groups. The Gerards lived right down the street from the Volunteer Fire Department, a social hub of the town. Life was downright peaceful until the afternoon of July 1st.
There was a stove malfunction, and it took out half of our house.
I was like the third one there behind my brother. The flames are already coming through the roof. We donned our Scott Air packs, cut holes in the roof, did everything we could to ventilate it, get the heat out so our guys could come up the stairs and put the fire out.
Fire was so hot up there that they said, looking through their mask that they wear, heat shows white, and he says it was completely white, the entire upstairs, and yet they were still up there.
It was a textbook fire, everything went by the book. It was perfect, but the poor family unfortunately lost their home and everything inside it. Luckily there was no one in the house.
The fortunes of the Gerards were definitely at an all-time low as they struggled to survive. But just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, they did.
My husband came home, he said he was feeling kind of weird, and he thought he'd go swimming with the kids, whoever wanted to go.
I was sitting at home watching the news, and it came over on our pager that there was a possible drowning at Green Falls near the boat launch.
We saw the rescue boat go out, and we all got up at the same time and said, oh, this is not good, and we ran out the house.
Carol Gerard thought the worst, as her husband and 3 of her children were at a remote lake swimming. Her husband was having problems while in deep water, and his 17-year-old son tried to save him. Both would struggle in the depths of Green Falls Pond.
When I arrived, I saw just Lucas, again, out on that little rock island out there. And my first focus was on him, making sure that he stayed there, making sure that he was okay.
I recognized the 11-year-old boy, not because of just the building that we put out, but because I go to church with him on every Sunday. So I knew the family.
So your heart must go out to him. It's like a neighbor.
Pretty much, yeah. But at that point in time, you don't think about that. You have something you have to do, and you do it. I jumped in and swam quite a bit, and then I turned around, and my deputy chief was up on the rocks, and he told me, he says, go another 10 feet, he says, I see a shadow. I finally got a hold of him and got to the surface, and by then, you know, I was struggling to hold this man up. He was a very big man.
I took off my boots and went into water with him.
We got him to the rocks. CPR was instantly started. I took a 15-second breather and decided I was going to go for the next one, and I found them, brought him to a waiting ambulance.
Our rescue time was so short. I think it was like from the time of the call to the time they were out of the water was like 19 minutes, roughly in that area.
They wouldn't tell us, they just said that there were 2 victims. They wouldn't say who they were. I asked, are they teenagers? You know, I said, my husband's here with my kids, or is it a, you know, older couple? What is it? I went to the ambulance and my 11-year-old was there.
A lot of the calls you go to, you never know who it's going to be. It could be somebody that you've never seen in your life before. It could be your best friend. It could be a relative. It could be your neighbor. You never know. You never know. In a small town like this, you never know who it's going to be. And that kind of wears on you when you're going to the call.
The death of the father and son devastated an already distressed family about to lose their home to bankruptcy. In typical Voluntown style, the same emergency workers who twice risked their own lives to try and save their neighbors, again, have done everything they can to help by holding an immensely successful fundraiser at the firehouse, an act consistent of volunteer firehouses everywhere.
It's unbelievable. It's very overwhelming. Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like everybody here is a family. I'm very humbled by it. I knew the numbers of the tickets they've sold and everything else, but to actually see the amount of people, it's just mind-boggling. It brings tears to your eyes just thinking.
Chicken, it's a red hot chicken right
here. We're staying. We wouldn't think of leaving the town because the amount of support that we're getting here too helps a lot. But this is where, you know, we want to be. We've loved this town since we moved here. And for us to leave now, I mean, my husband and son are buried here, so.
As far as I know, they're trying to regroup. They're going to try to rebuild. They want to remain in this town, and I hope they do.
I still try to figure out what really drives those people.
You know, you're helping your neighbors when they need it the most.
When you save a life, it's great. When you get there and you're able to do something positive, something that really made a difference to people, or you made a great stop on a fire, you saved a tremendous amount of property, you got out of there with a great sense of satisfaction, and that motivates you to go on to the next one.
I'm there to help people, to help them in time of need. They've lost everything most of the time, so I want to give them as much as I can. If I can't give them money, I can give them my time.
If we can get there quicker and help somebody, that's absolutely
why we do this.
Because if I don't do it, there's not a lot of people out there who are willing to do it. I have the skills and the ability, so and I have some free time, so I can do it.
So yes, I felt it was my duty. I know it may sound corny, but to me it was a duty, and I've enlisted 5 of my colleagues.
When I came to this country, I see that you can do a lot of volunteer stuff, and in my heart, it went out there. I said, I want to do this. I want to support the people, and that's the reason why I do it, because I didn't have a choice to do this to my country. You know, my country said you don't know nobody, you will never be a firefighter, or you will never be a cop. So here you got more opportunity. When out of the opportunity, I love it to help people. And matter of fact, because there, I fight all the time with my wife, because all the time people call me, I am out there helping my people, you know.
We all pay our taxes, we all do all that stuff, but we go above and beyond. We give back, you know. When you look back at 1945, Sherwood's father gave his life because he thought it was the right thing to do.
The opportunity to go in-state or to another state and help people who've had a real bad situation happen actually is really rewarding.
I don't know how to describe it. I have to be more than just a citizen. I don't know how to put that in other words.
And why do you feel that way?
You're born and raised in this country. I'm from another country, and I have to earn my right to be here.
And this is your way of doing that?
Correct.
Anytime you affect someone's life in a positive manner and pull them from harm's way, whatever the situation be, if you're the person that's done it, it's 100% rewarding and then some.
Well, I think initially I was concerned after 911 about how prepared Groton would be and what would happen behind the scenes if Millstone, there was an accident at Millstone. And when I saw an ad for CERT classes, I thought, you know, it's time I stop watching the news and start being prepared as an individual should something happen.
While altruistic, volunteers are often the first to admit that they do it because they love it.
You have all the IT capabilities, the computers. I'm very much into computers and telephones and all the bells and whistles and toys, and it's a lot of fun.
Ham radio is a great hobby, and working with the emergency communications team here gives you a sort of a sense that you're actually contributing to the community, and frankly, it's fun.
There is action. Some people enjoy the action. I'm one of those.
The adrenaline rush, you know, going into a burning building.
The excitement of it all.
The excitement of, you know, being able to help people, the excitement of not knowing what's coming up next.
I like the action, you know. I think all kids like to jump on the red truck and squirt water, if you will, but I really like to help people.
Yeah, it's like our getaway. If we got our family at the house, but if it's like, we just come here, relax. We get through like here, we go back home.
I've only been here 3 weeks and everyone's already accepted me. It's like having a family away from the family. I'm technically not even a member yet, and the day I showed up, they all accepted me.
The camaraderie and the social aspect of it are really good.
I've made many, many good friends, not only with the other firefighters, but with their families. My family and their families are friends.
Just like a part of the family. I have nobody, no family here.
Some started as volunteer firefighters because they want to further their career and become career firefighters. And this is a way for them to get the bug and see if they really enjoy it.
Making friends, it's learning about law enforcement, learning what to do in given situations, and being around the community that I want to be a part of.
You know, they don't ask to be recognized. They don't ask, you know, to have their names in the newspaper. They just simply do the job.
The firemen, you can't say enough about the firemen. Number one, they worked and they were very helpful to me and my family, and they also looked out for everybody else.
You think of how our regular days unfold, and how many times have you had to drop everything to race to an accident scene and put your own safety at risk to save a perfect stranger? And that's what these people do all the time.
It's nice to know that people are amongst us. They could be your neighbors, they could be your co-workers, they're everywhere. It's nice to know they do exist.
How many times have I driven to work or anywhere and seen emergency service workers doing the kinds of things they have to do, and just thinking, very selfishly, they're in my way. I got to get to work, and here was a day where all of a sudden I needed them. A dozen people needed them desperately, and these people show up. They come out of nowhere, and they show up for you, and they take care of you with all sorts of expertise and sensitivity and kindness. The fact is, I found myself in a horrible situation that day. I needed help, and people showed up for me. And there were a dozen other people in a similar circumstance. And throughout that whole 100 to 200 yards of devastation, people were there helping their fellow man.
I can't praise people enough, and it opened my eyes. Now I have to do something for other people. You know, it woke me up to, you never think that things like this can happen to you. It happened to me. It can happen to you. It can happen to every single one of us.
People in Connecticut are blessed. We have a lot of very talented people. We're asking people to give back a little bit, work with us, help your community, in turn help yourself and others.
You know, you think to yourself, I don't have time. I work, I have to come home, I have to do this, the kids are here, this. But it only takes a moment, and it really is very, very rewarding. No matter what the volunteer organization that you belong to is, then you really can offer something.
If you do, it makes the world that much better, and it shows, especially in a small community.
I think they should absolutely give it a try, go on ride-alongs and see if it's something they would like to do.
Just by taking a CPR class, you get exposed to certain scenes, certain incidents, and hey, I may want to go into nursing. Or you become a junior volunteer firefighter and you go down and participate in whichever way you can and say, I like to try to do this. Stop at your local firehouse, police station, ambulance service, and say, what do you need? How can I help? And knock on the door, and you should be welcomed with open arms and a nice handshake.
I think it's extremely important that people actually learn from the stories of people that have sacrificed themselves.
19 years after the fact, a pretty young girl walked into the office over there and she said, you're Mr. Coles, aren't you? I said, yes. And she said, you helped me out of a serious automobile accident on Griswold Street 19 years ago, and according to the doctors in the hospital, you people saved my foot and my leg from being lost forever. And I stood up and she hugged and gave me a kiss, and that's what it's all about, you know.
You know, our EMTs use the defibrillator till we start the victim was in cardiac arrest, and you know, a year later he came into one of our meetings and thanked us. You know, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
She survived cardiac arrest, and that's not that unusual. However, about maybe 3 or 4 months later, I received a letter from the family. And the letter was, Dear Pete, thank you very much for having such a wonderful EMS system and for your personal participation. And I'd just like you to know that my mother used to be a cranky old gal, and we had trouble keeping her under control. But now she's in assisted living in South Carolina. Her personality has changed 100% for the better.
The volunteers don't get paid. And they put their lives on the line for all of us, not just me or you, but all of us. And they don't think of us as colors or nationalities. They think of us as people, and they do the best they can to try to help us.
I had an accident, had an operation. I was home 2 days later, and I'm recovering. However, maybe it wouldn't have been that way if I hadn't had all these people touch me on the way. You know, the bike rescue people, the unknown rider who stopped to talk, the 2 teams of EMT people who helped, the ambulance people.
I would love to personally thank every single one of them, but it is, I mean, and I try, but I know I'm not reaching everybody. But yeah, my entire family, we're just so set back by all this, and it's the most awesome thing that we've ever seen or heard. And we just need to say thank you to everybody.
I feel it's a privilege for me to come here and thank them myself. Thank you. Giuseppe is a very nice man, and he's a very nice person, and I want to thank you guys for what you did for me and my family and all of us. Thank you very much. And I mean it too. Thank you. Don't make me cry. I don't want to look at the camera now. I want to start crying. So thanks again.
I just don't have enough gratitude to express towards those people. They're wonderful people. I am very, very grateful that they are amongst us and they come when you needed them the most. Thank you, Todd Myers, very much that you were there at the right time, at the right place with me, and you saved my life. I will never ever forget it. Thank you.
In terms of...
I'm getting quite emotional
That's
now,
okay.
excuse me.
I can understand that feeling. I mean, now you're living your life. Everything that happens from now on is because of his action.
Exactly. My life would have ended 3 years ago, and I would never be able to enjoy, the recent events that occurred in my life. And it's so wonderful. It's the greatest gift he could ever give me.
She's alive because 300 volunteers responded to the scene of the Avon Mountain accident. Imagine being one of the people who was able to give that woman her life back. You can be one of them by calling right now 1-877-962-JOIN. We're not asking for any dollars tonight. We're not asking you to pledge any money. We're not looking for your credit cards. We're looking for you. We need your help. In the wake of the anniversary of 9/11, in the wake of the big hurricane season that we're having that's already been hitting some of the communities in our country. Think about what would happen if a disaster happened in your community. It could be on a wide scale, it could be a hurricane, it could be a huge fire like the one at the Peachtree Apartments, or it could be something small. It could be a one-car accident. I remember the night that I was on my way home from work at midnight and I had a collision with a tractor trailer. I wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for the emergency responders, the volunteer firefighters, and the EMTs who came and took care of me. I know that's why I'm walking today. I know that's why I'm alive today. And I'll never forget on that late night, it was raining, there were cars whizzing by on I-95. I'll never forget when they pulled up and they said to me, "You're going to be okay." And I knew I would be. Wouldn't you like to be one of those people? 1-877-962-JOIN. We'll find something for you no matter what your skills are. We're looking for all kinds of people tonight. There are several people here to help me encourage you to join. One of them is sitting right next to me. He's Richard Fontana Jr. He's the Deputy Director of Emergency Management in New Haven. Also is involved with the Medical Reserve Corps, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Sitting next to him is First Lieutenant Richard Abate, who has been involved for many years with the Civil Air Patrol, which is officially the auxiliary of the United States Air Force. I don't know that a lot of people know that, but we'll talk a little bit more about what you do as well. Jason McCoy is joining us. He's not only an attorney, but he is the mayor of the town of Vernon. In Vernon, you have the largest volunteer fire department of any community in the state of Connecticut. Vernon is how big in size compared to those other communities?
30,000 people.
And yet you have such a large volunteer force. We're going to look for some of your advice on how you do that. And of course, there are people who don't want to go anywhere without their pets. There are times when leaving the scene of an emergency without your pet, without your beloved cat or dog or bird, can lead to another crisis, people refusing to leave the scene of an emergency. Well, that's where Dr. Chris Gargamelli comes in. He is a veterinarian, and he is also the head of the state animal response team. You know, some people may think, well, gee, if my life were in danger, if I were being threatened by a hurricane, I wouldn't care what it was. I'd grab my kids, I'd grab my mom, I'd be out of there. But we've seen time and time again where people stay behind because they can't take their animal to a shelter. They don't know what they're going to do with their dog or their cat.
And that's correct. And we found with past instances like Hurricane Katrina that it's a public safety and a public health issue, that people refuse to evacuate without their animals. So what the Connecticut State Animal Response Team does is we offer what's called a co-located shelter. That whenever a human shelter opens, we open up an animal shelter. In that shelter, you go to your shelter and you leave your pet right next door, and therefore you guys are, everybody's together. And it's that allows us to basically serve a need so that people and animals can stay together and people will be willing to evacuate and everyone, pets and animals, remain safe.
And I should say that Dr. Gargamelli is the regional coordinator for the team, and we're going to talk about how all you have to do is be an animal lover to get involved with this one. 1-877-962-JOIN. If you have a pet that you love, or if you'd love to be involved in something like that, boy, do we have a place for you. Call us now. I want to talk a little bit to Richard Fontana now about the Medical Reserve Corps. It's something that probably a lot of us haven't thought about, but there could be instances when People are going to need medication, they're going to need it fast, and they're going to need it in large numbers.
That's correct. We have a responsibility to medicate the entire population in a 48-hour period, and we can't do that
All
without
3.5 million
help.
of us?
All 3.5 million. We have 5 appropriate DEMIS regions, and each of those regions have a regional MRC as well as local MRCs. An MRC is Medical Reserve Corps. It's another arm just like CERT. It's a gigantic responsibility, but we can't do it without the help of whether they be medical professionals or non-professionals, but it's going to operate 24 hours a day for 48 hours until the entire population is in fact medicated with either a antibiotic or an antiviral.
Okay, now I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I don't have any of those qualifications. How could I help?
We want you to pick up the phone, give a call, and what we'll do is we'll find a task for you. There could be simple tasks. They don't have to be medical. They could be, in fact, someone who might be able to help us move people through the clinic. Clerical duties, greeters, just basic people that want to give a certain amount of time, and the time commitment here is very small.
Sounds minimal, yeah.
It's very minimal, and what we need to do is we need to have people step up to the plate and help us, because without people doing it, this will not happen. So they're our greatest asset, and the people step up, give us a hand. We really need to have that happen.
And here's something we need to emphasize is that you can't wait for the emergency to happen and then volunteer. We need to know who you are now. We need to get your name on record tonight. We need to know how to reach you. We need to match you up with the right organization where you can do the most good. Whether you can give an hour a month, an hour a week, whether you can be on call 24/7. Please don't wait until the hurricane hits. Please don't wait until the alarm sirens go off. Please don't wait until we're on the verge of a pandemic flu epidemic. Please call us tonight so that we can have your name and we can be ready. 1-877-96-2-JOIN is the number to call. All the training will be given to you. You bring to the table what you can bring. We'll match that and we'll make you a better person when you walk away from it. I want to talk a little bit about the Civil Air Patrol. Now, this is the kind of thing that people probably think, I don't know how I could ever get involved with that. You'd have to be a pilot, you'd have to have a plane. That true?
Well, it was at one time.
Yeah.
When the organization began in 1941, 6 days before Pearl Harbor. It was primarily made up of private pilots with their own planes, but we are now the auxiliary of the United States Air Force. We fly Air Force supplied aircraft. We have a number of different types of aircraft that we use nationwide. Here in Connecticut, we have 5 planes stationed here in Hartford, in Groton, and in Danbury generally. And we have tremendous amounts of opportunity for people outside of the aviation portion of what we do. We have a ground team that goes out on search and rescue operations. When we're in the air looking for whatever it is that has to be found, we need boots on the ground to get to it. We have a whole cadet program that works with kids from age 12 through 21, training them in emergency services, giving them resources in aerospace education. So it's a fantastic organization, and I just love being a part of it, and I want to be part of it for the rest of my life.
I've met a lot of cadets who are in urban areas. That seems to be a very strong program.
Well, it is. We've got 15 squadrons across the state of Connecticut, both in urban and rural settings. But our urban program, I happen to be connected with the Hartford Squadron, based at Brainerd Field. We've got a cadre of about 40 or 50 young people from the Hartford area, every race, ethnic group, religious background, all ages, as I say, generally from 12 through 18. And the opportunity for them to become a part of their community at such an early age is one of the most important parts of our charter.
And that's something I want to stress, that we're looking for whole families to join. We're looking for young people. We're looking for older people. We're looking for people who are also busy with their careers and their families. We will find an opportunity for you no matter what your availability is. We'll find a way to work you in. 1-877-96-2-JOIN is the number. 1-877-96-2-JOIN. Let's talk to the mayor for a minute. 73% of the emergency first responders in this state are volunteers. You are facing all the time the budget crunches that all of our elected officials do. Could you operate without these volunteers?
No, absolutely not. It's one of the most important things that we have, people who can volunteer in the communities, whether it be boards, commissions, or firefighters, the auxiliary groups, any type of first responders. It is so significant. I don't think any town could function without these people. And there's other things that they also do, they bring community, they can bring community spirit, and it's so important. People need to start to give back to their community. They need to, but what does this do for them? It also helps them. It's a way to socialize. If you're new to a community, then you should go down and become a first responder. If you're looking, as we saw in the video earlier, with a woman who had a regular job every day, she worked at Travelers. You want to get in shape. You want some excitement. You want to be doing something. Our community also offers a pension for the firefighters. The auxiliary
Now that's really
groups.
interesting, and that's something that the state has talked about in a number of communities and has talked about on a statewide level, is trying to offer some other incentives for people to go ahead and volunteer. How has that worked out in your town?
I think it's worked out very well. We also offer supplemental insurance in case someone's injured, but I think the pension's something that tells these guys, tells these women that you're going to have something. We appreciate what you're doing. We may not be able to afford to have a full-time department, but it becomes a part of the community. Most of these men and women who join, their families have been involved with this. It's just a pretty amazing thing, and we're very lucky. Every community in Connecticut needs their volunteers, and we need them to join. It's very, very important. We can't do this without you.
So we'd like you to call us now. 1-877-962-JOIN is the number. You're going to be talking to a real live person who's going to take down all of your information, and they are going to make sure that it goes to the community agency that is most appropriate for you. We will find a place for you that is convenient. We'll find a place that will match the amount of time and the amount of effort that you can afford to put in. Please don't say to yourself, no, that's for somebody else. I don't have the time to do that. Please think about how you could find some time and how much it would add to your life and the life of your family if you had a volunteer organization to join. 1-877-962-JOIN. Maybe you can only work on a project, but as we heard in some of the earlier breaks, you might be an accountant, a business person, someone who can assist in a fundraising drive. Perhaps you can become a member of the board and assist in the business aspects of setting up a volunteer organization and running that volunteer organization. It might be something you only have to go to a few times a year, but boy, could we use your skill. 1-877-962-JOIN. I want to go back to our veterinarian now. One of the things that people get concerned about is, what do I take in case of an emergency? And we probably didn't talk enough tonight about how people need to be ready. Not only do you need to be ready to go on your own, but if you have pets, you need to have what you call a grab-and-go kit.
Yes. And it's a very simple concept of things that you would take for yourself in a disaster you want to have for your animals. You want to make sure that they're current on their vaccines and that you have records for that. If they're on any medications, you want to make sure you have those handy and ready to go and have enough supplies.
Right.
Because in a disaster situation, your veterinarian's office might not be open. So you want to make sure you have those medications with you. And another very important point that we stress on is this concept of a microchip, having a permanent form of identification on your animal. So should their collar get lost, or should they get separated from you, there's a permanent embedded form of identification that they can be reunited.
How popular has that become in Connecticut?
That has become very popular. And the microchip companies have made it very affordable, and every veterinary office that I've come across has been more than willing and more than happy to provide that service to their clients. And again, across the state, in all the shelters, in all the veterinary hospitals, we have scanners that if a stray animal comes in, or if somebody just finds an animal, we run the scanner over and can try to reunite the people with their animals.
It's something that people didn't pay that much attention to, I don't think, until Hurricane Katrina. And then we saw all of those stranded animals. I have a friend who's a reporter who was covering Katrina. She ended up adopting a dog that had wandered away. No one knew who it belonged to. They couldn't find any identification. That dog now went from New Orleans and now lives in Connecticut.
And that's what we're trying to avoid. That's, again, such a tragedy to lose a personal friend. You know, in this day and age, people consider animals family members in often cases, and to be separated would be tragic. And that's why, having the shelters next to the human shelter is so critical, and that's where we need volunteers with the Connecticut State Animal Response Team. The volunteers we need are people to help run the administration side of the shelter, making sure that the animals get taken in, making sure that there's clean cages. So you don't have to have any veterinary background.
Right.
We're just looking for people who are animal lovers. So please call and give us a hand with
And I
that.
know there are plenty of those out there. 1-877-962-JOIN is the number to call. I want to go back to you, Mr. Fontana. We talked a little bit about the Medical Reserve Corps. I talked about in the need of having to give emergency medications. What other kinds of things is the Medical Reserve Corps doing?
One of the other things that they could actually do is we have set up shelters, and prior to going into a shelter, you might need to set up what's called a triage. And those medical personnel, whether they be EMTs, paramedics, nurses, doctors, and those folks that are retired as well, could actually create a triage setup so we can have the ability to, before people get into a shelter, to make sure that they are in fact healthy, especially during Hurricane Katrina. That actually was a big issue. People were going into the shelter when they were in fact either hurt or sick. So that's one of the components they can do. Also, if there were a large-scale public health emergency where we had an overwhelming amount of people in the hospitals, we can set up what's called alternate care facilities. So Medical Reserve Corps people can in fact staff those as well. And it doesn't have to be, I can't stress enough, it does not have to be the medical care providers only. It could be the regular clerical people. They have skills that we need as well.
Here's the thing, we need them now. We can't wait until that emergency breaks out to be looking for people, to be having people show up untrained, uncoordinated. We need them to call now.
A simple call, and just so we can put you in our database. And
We
say,
might not need them for 6 months, we might not need them for a year, who knows?
hopefully not.
Yep.
Hopefully we don't need them,
Yep.
but we want to make sure that we're prepared, and it's a very simple call to say, I want to help.
Can't
And
all of us do that?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I would like to think so. We do have another panelist who's joining us. Jean Speck is with the Kent Volunteer Fire Department. In fact, she is the president of the Kent Volunteer Fire Department. Are there very many women fire department presidents in the state?
I'm not really sure. Probably not too many. I think we're a sort of rare breed, although I think there's a chief down in Brookfield or somewhere like that.
You said that there was another woman who really became your mentor, and I would like to encourage more women to come out for these services, although we've tried to emphasize tonight that you don't need to be a person ready to run into a burning building to be part of your volunteer fire squad or EMS service, but maybe you can be. How did you find that in yourself?
It's funny, my first experience with the fire department was actually as a patient. I had an allergic reaction and 5 women showed up at my doorstep within 3 minutes and took my son, and we all went to the hospital and came back, and by the time I got back, both my husband and I were getting recruited. And so it was just an amazing experience to go through from that end, seeing these women who, one of them came from preschool and one of them came from her restaurant, and they all wanted to just help me for no other reason than I needed it.
And they may have saved your life.
Yeah, and it was amazing to just see how they came from nowhere for no reason, just to help. And that was hugely inspiring to me. And the woman who I was mentioning before, who wanted to join the fire department, and they told her that she had to become a firefighter. This was back in the 60s. And she said, okay, and she joined the fire department and became a firefighter and sort of led the way for a lot of other women. But it's really a lot about just the feeling that you get going to somebody's house in the middle of the night when they are at their absolute worst, whether they're actually clinically at the bottom or emotionally or however, and you end up at the other end of the call and they are thanking you, and that's the pay that we get.
I know that feeling. I wanted to ask you, Mayor, you've been so successful in Vernon with having such a large volunteer fire department, and yet you were telling us how you depend on other departments to come in. In fact, there was a recent fire not very long ago where really it was mutual aid and the coordination regionally that really helped you.
And I remember the night very well. I got a phone call in the middle of the night from Bill Call, and I usually, not as often as I should, but I go to the fires because I get calls. And Chief Call calls me and he says, look, there's a problem up here. We're on High Street. We're not getting water. And I'm calling mutual aid. And that's an area of town that has hydrants. So they sent out mutual aid, and Ellington, Bolton, Tolland, Vernon. I hope I'm not leaving out of town, but they were able to bring from downtown Rockville up around the corner, up Cottage Street, all the way up towards Henry Park, where the tower is, up to High Street, water from down there, and they were able to put out the fire.
How far are we talking about?
About probably close to a half a mile.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the folks from Ellington came in with a hose. It was a huge hose that was bigger than the ones that we had on our trucks, because we can hook up, if we don't have our pumper trucks, to the Connecticut water system. And that fire had just started to spread to another building. It would have destroyed the entire neighborhood had it not been from the support of all these different volunteers. People just don't realize that this is what these folks are doing for us. It's just amazing, and we need more people to join. We need more people to become involved. It's the way that we support each other, and this goes deep into our history in New England.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been about volunteerism, and we need people to join.
Heck, we have a town called Voluntown, for that matter. Gene, we haven't had too much time with you, but I wanted to ask you, in about 30 seconds, can you tell us if there was one moment when you really said to yourself, this is why I do this, this is what it means?
Yeah, it's an easy moment. We had a call for a possible drowning, and it was in the Housatonic River. We get a lot of calls in the Housatonic River based on where we are, and it was in the middle of the summer. I had been working at one of the private schools as a tutor, but it was the summer, so no school, and pulled this young man out of the river, and he was one of my students. And sadly he passed away, but I was able to, when I recognized his face, it was a brief moment, and I knew the job that I needed to do, and we just went to work and did our job. And
how many of us would want to be prepared in the case of an emergency? And Mr. Fontana, that was one of the things we were talking about, are the CERT programs that really can train people in not a very long period of time, but give you a little of this, a little of that, a little of, so that you can go back into your own community and feel prepared if an emergency breaks out, to even help your neighbor.
Yeah, as the commissioner alluded to, the commitment for training is about 25 hours, and it actually prepares you for a number of different types of, whether it be disaster medical assistance, whether it be fire extinguisher training, first aid training, but these groups are an extension of the, I want to say, career and volunteer organizations that might be overwhelmed during a disaster.
Right.
That's where these folks come into play. Right. It's reaching out into the community. They're great programs. They don't take a lot of time. We need people to step up. It's a lot of fun. You meet new people, and the best thing is you're preparing your community.
Absolutely. And I want to stress one more time that if you're looking for a way to help your community, if you have even an inkling that you could be of service, no matter how much time you can give, no matter where you live, we can use your help. Please, won't you volunteer? 1-877-96-2-JOIN. Thank you.
On Watch, Connecticut's Emergency Service Volunteers, is a CPTV Connecting Our Communities initiative in partnership with the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, Citizen Corps, the Commission on Fire Prevention and Control, the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and the Public Health Foundation of Connecticut. Additional support comes from the Torrington Medical Reserve Corps and MyTV9. The preceding program was a Boris Productions presentation.